Hey.
And a good friend of mine recommended I open up with a joke, so I'm going to open up with a joke. A drunk goes into a bar and asks for a shot of Jim Beam. The bartender pours it for the drunk and pours it, and the drunk pushes it aside and asks for another shot of Jim Beam. The bartender pours it, and the drunk drinks it. The bartender says, "I watched what you did, and I don't understand why you pushed the first one away and drank the second one." The drunk stated, "I've been doing those AA meetings, and they said, whatever you do, don't take the first drink." Pretty good. All right, my sobriety date is January 29th, 2017. I was born here in Mableton, born and raised in Mableton. I was the youngest of three. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old. We spent every other weekend, pretty much with my three cousins as well, at my dad's. And the way I like to say it there is just that there was a lot of bad things that happened. It had nothing to do with my dad, but he lived in a trailer park, and there was a lot of bad things that happened there, unbeknownst to him. So, that happened probably when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. And life kept going on, and the memory does this amazing thing. I actually forgot about it, the things that had happened. They stopped happening, and then I forgot about them. Which was, it blows me away what the memory can do. But when I was 12, I injured my back, lifting some weights actually, and when I was laid up with that back injury, I started remembering all the things that had happened, and that kind of sent me on my journey, a pretty rough journey there for a while. I started experimenting with my older brother and stepbrother did inhalants and things like that, so I started experimenting with stuff like that, and started getting into self-hatred, self-harm, and things like that. But at the same time, we as a family were going to church, and I was involved with a youth group, and we were set up to have a confirmation class one Sunday, and this is where I say God. This is the first time I could really see where God intervened in my life, because I was in such miserable shape. But I showed up for this confirmation class, and back then we didn't have cell phones, so my mom dropped me off for an hour and a half class. And it turns out that the pastor who was running it, he and I had the wrong day scheduled. Somehow we both showed up, and nobody else showed up. So I was stuck with him for an hour and a half, and that turned out to be, I ended up, for whatever reason I couldn't tell you, but I just poured out my soul to him with everything that happened. I was the first person I ever told about the things that had happened, and that, he was a good confidant for a while. I talked to him for a long time after that, but things, still kept going downhill. As far as I started hanging out with my sister and cousin, and we would drink a lot, or we were getting into drinking with them. One defining moment for me as an alcoholic, I say, is I went to a party one time with my cousin, and I don't even like beer. I just do not like the taste of beer, but that's all we had there was beer, and I started drinking, and I only had one goal in mind, and that was oblivion. And that's always been my goal when drinking. And so I kept drinking and drinking and drinking, and then I found myself throwing up in the bathroom, and I came back out, and I started drinking again. And my cousin came up, and she says, "No, you don't understand." She was like, "After you throw up, you stop drinking." And I said, "Well, that may be the way you do it, but that is not the way I do it." So, and I just proceeded to go on. So that was one of my defining moments there as an alcoholic in my younger years. The depression, kept on, and I got to where I was getting, I would say, suicidal. I didn't know what I was going to do to myself, and one day I skipped school, and I called up, my friend the pastor, and I said, "Look, I just really don't know what I'm going to do with myself," and I was scared of what I was going to do. And he came over, and after some phone calls and all that, he ended up taking me to Ridgeview. And that was my first 3 times in Ridgeview. and that was, I love how Greta always says it, where there's Greta, you went in with whatever it was, you went in and you came out an alcoholic. Well, that's what happened with me. I went in to Ridgeview with depression and suicidal tendencies, and I came out also an alcoholic and an addict. So I was introduced to my first AA meetings through Ridgeview, and did that, and it actually, like I said, I went in 3 different times, and so I did have this interest in getting better and in getting the help and getting better and stopping drinking. So I continued to go to meetings, and I had some relapses, but I continued going to meetings, and I eventually caught on. I guess I was about 16 when I finally caught on to the program a bit and started hanging around. Some of you may know the Hole in the Wall in Smyrna. That was my home group back in the 90s. And that's where I got sober. And that's also where I met my husband, who 13-stepped me. And we will be celebrating 25 years of marriage in March. So it actually worked out pretty well this time. But met him there, and life got good. I spent, my time, we both spent our time in and around, living the program in the middle of the bed, working with a sponsor, doing all those things, and as life kept going and life was just good and good and good, we strayed a little away from the program. We still had all our friends in the meetings and all that, but we hung out with them outside, and we just really weren't doing the meetings as much. We got married when I was 21, and at 24, we had our first child, Jeremiah. And, that was just amazing, of course, becoming a parent. And I couldn't have been prepared for what was coming, but when he was when he was 2, he was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma cancer. And we spent 8 months pretty much in the hospital. He was in ICU for a long time. We went through a lot of chemotherapy. He had a 9.5-hour surgery that removed all of the tumor, all of the cancer. But unfortunately, with the protocol for that was to be hit with another heavy round of chemotherapy, and his system wasn't able to take that, and he passed away. And that was at 2.5. The day after he was diagnosed with cancer, we found out we were pregnant with our second child. And so that was a little tough, because it was, I was questioning God, what's going on here. So after Jeremiah passed, Jake was born 6 weeks later, and I pretty much, I know I did. I stayed sober for him, to be there for him, to raise him. I still, wasn't going to any meetings or anything like that. I just completely gotten away from that. And everybody had told me to, as far as grief goes, and I don't ever try to give out grief advice now, because it's just different for everybody, but I kept hearing from people, if you just get through all your the first birthday, the first Thanksgiving, the first Christmas, if you can get through all those first, it gets better. And so that's what I had stuck in my head. Let's just get through all these firsts. And then we got to the first anniversary, and it was no better. It was just as painful and just as hurtful, and all of a sudden I was completely lost, because I had no goal whatsoever in mind of how to survive. And excuse my language, Helene, for a minute, but this is where I said, fuck you, God, watch what I can do to me. And my mission became to destroy me, because I knew the only way I could hurt God was to hurt me. And that was what I was going to do. So I spent the next 8 years trying to do that. I drank heavily. I went from the job I'd had for 5 years, and I went, and this was God watching out for me again, because somehow I still have the job I have today that I went out and got back in 2003. But I got that job, and somehow I lucked up and was working for a drug addict and alcoholic. Right. She liked to go out at lunch, and we would go to the Mexican restaurant. We'd do shots of tequila, and I'd drink margaritas, and I'd go back and I would just sit there and kind of do like this in front of the computer, and that was pretty much it. So that was, I don't know how. She 6 months later, I think it was, she quit because she felt like she wasn't being paid enough to, go get drunk and do drugs all day. So I took her position, and I continued the habits and the drinking. I mean, I would bring my coffee thermos, and I would just have airplane bottles of rum and, Cokes, and I would just put them all in, a coffee thermos and just sit there and drink all day and have peppermints, when I needed to pop a peppermint, I'd pop a peppermint. And that's what I did for a long time to get through. It's just, like I said, whatever I could do to destroy me and kill the pain, and that was my goal. Also during that time, I had bouts of back pain off and on, and through that discovered that I absolutely love pain pills. So that is in my story as well, and I got hooked on those several times, and fought that. Just to show a little bit of where my head was at, one time a friend of mine who also had lost a child to cancer, she and I, with 2 other friends, went to New Orleans on a trip, and one night we got very drunk, and we were I can't remember what the street was, but it was, somewhere down in New Orleans, and it was a very busy street, and it was late at night, we were walking up the middle of the street, with cars honking and going around, and the 2 friends we were with were normal people, and they were freaking out over there, and that was just, she and I both, she lost her child a year after me, so we were very close in timing, and we just both had that mindset of, really, even though she had another child too, and we love our children here, but, we also had that desire to be with our children there, and so it was a dare, a dare to God, let's do this. So that was the frame of mind that I was in. Kept going, kept drinking, and we went to these bereavement workshops that they held once a year. Cure Childhood Cancer is an amazing organization, and they would hold these bereavement workshops where we spent the weekend there, and my mom would keep my son, and my husband and I went there, and they gave you 2 drink tickets, and my husband started drinking again. I keep talking about him, but he was drinking again too, and so they would give you 2 drink tickets, and we would go around to everybody in the group who doesn't want their drink tickets, and so we're going around collecting drink tickets. And so that made for a good night, of course. 9 months later, little Jack Daniels and little Margarita were born. So you have to be careful with that. We do have twins. Their names are really Benny and Allie. I didn't go through naming them that. But yeah, that was a big surprise for us. But after they were born, I did stop drinking once I knew I was pregnant. I managed to stop drinking for the pregnancy, and once they were born, I picked right up where I'd left off and was drinking again, and drinking pretty heavily. It wasn't uncommon for me to drink and drive, myself, but also to drink and drive with the kids in the car. If I had somewhere to be and I had to get them there too, and I was drinking, that was not an obstacle. Thank God, I've never even had a DUI. I haven't been in an accident caused from my drinking. I've been in a lot of accidents, but not caused by my drinking, caused by my sleeping. It's another story. But sleeping and driving do not mix. Another example, Adam and I would always go out, and as it turns out, he's still not in the program today. He doesn't need to be. His problem is drugs. It's not really alcohol. He does it. He will sit down with a drink and he'll fall asleep, and the drink is just sitting there. And I completely don't understand how he does that, but he does it. So during my drinking career, whenever we went somewhere, he was always our designated driver. It was not me. And this one time, it was a party being thrown by his company for Christmas, and he was like, he's like, you gotta let me drink this time. You gotta be the designated driver. So I had a major resentment, and so whatever, let's go. And got there, and I'm an alcoholic. I could not drink, so I got wasted as well. But I was still pissed at him. because that's what we do as women. So we got in the car to go home, and he still wants me to drive because he's totally wasted, and I probably was the better one to drive. But we're going down 285. I'm hauling ass, and he's like, "I'm gonna be sick. I'm gonna be sick. You gotta pull over." And I look at him, and I'm like, "No, roll the window down." So his head's out the window, puking, and the next morning we had to tell the kids that a bird threw up on the car. And he was out there with his hangover cleaning my car. So, but that's how well I did as a designated driver. I won't do it today either. I just don't do that. So, we got to, like I said, it was about 8 years that when I started drinking again that I came to a really, really bad night where really, really bad stuff happened again because I got so drunk I could not defend myself. And that was not how I did not want to relive my past like that in the least, but I did because of my actions. So after that night, I was upset with me, I was upset with what happened, and every person in my life was upset with me. And I just wanted to do the right thing, whatever it was. So I came back to AA. And we were living out here in Douglasville now, so I actually found the Douglasville group and went there. But the problem is that I was convinced that unless you had lost a child, you couldn't possibly relate to the pain that I was going through, and you couldn't tell me how to get sober because you hadn't been there. You know, I had not, at that time, it was all about compare, and so I sat in the back of the room with my arms crossed, angry with God, angry with myself, angry with everybody in that room because they had no idea what I was going through, and I did that for about a week. And then it was a speaker meeting, and this guy got up there to tell his story, and thankfully I had the cotton out of my ears and I was listening, and I can't tell his story for him, but I can just tell you that and he didn't lose a child, but he had a tragedy in his life that just pulled at my heartstrings. And it was something, and I get chill bumps now talking about it, it was something that I could relate to pain-wise, and he was standing up there. I think at the time he probably had 4 or 5 years sober, I think. And it was just, it really hit me. And so after that, I started softening up a little bit, listening a little bit. I got a sponsor, and I really started getting involved, getting in the middle of the bed, working the steps, doing my thing. I think I told my story a time or two then too, and it was good. As I was working the program, my spirituality was growing more and more in my relationship with God, and I actually got very interested in a lot of different religions and studying religion. I love studying Buddhism and practicing meditation, and just like I said, my relationship with God just grew enormously. I was going to church at the time as well. And actually with the pastor who put me in Ridgeview was the pastor of this church, so and to this day he's a good friend of mine. So I was going to this church, and and normally, those of you who know me here, I'm sitting out on the porch, I'll talk and all that, but getting in the situation of meetings and stuff like that, I just get nervous and I worry about tripping over myself, and I don't share a whole lot. Well, put me in a church environment, and I kind of do the same thing, but I slowly started coming out of my shell there, and I think when I really blossomed was when I got this opportunity to lead a comparative religion class, and that was just an awesome opportunity, and so I got really involved with that group and started, branching out with the people of the church, and they were my people just as much as the people in these rooms were my people. So that was really cool to have that. Because yeah, and they all knew that I was an alcoholic. So when we get accepted out there by normal people for who we are, it's really cool. And especially in an environment that in many cases people have experienced is very judgmental and things like that. So it was a great experience. About I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years into my sobriety, my back started acting up on me again, and I think I knew where this was going to go, but I went there anyway because I love them, pain pills, and I relapsed on pain pills. Even after all that, and it was really difficult because it wasn't one of those gradual, let me slowly stop going to meetings and slowly, you know, get into denial and slowly tell myself I can drink again. It was just like one day I was doing the deal, and the next day I was at the doctor's office, and filling a prescription of pain pills, and I did not take them as prescribed, not in the least. And so I knew immediately that I had to walk away, and that was hard because I had friends in the program. But I did. I walked away, and I spent the next year, a miserable year on pills of, getting, it was a large prescription. It's like 120 pills they would give me, and I'd go through them in like a week and a half. And then I would go through the DTs for the next week, and it was just so miserable. And I'd swear I wasn't going to do it again. And as soon as that prescription refilled, I was doing it again. And I did that for a year. And then at this point in time, I've been seeing, I get outside help. I've been seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist off and on for some time. But my therapist at the time, she was really pushing for me to go into detox and get off the pills. And that last time was just so bad that I was like, I've got to do this. I've got to get off of them. So, so I did. I went into detox over at Cobb Hospital, and I managed to get off the pain pills. But I wasn't willing to come back here. It's funny how we do that. It's like we're ashamed, we're whatever we are, but we don't want to just walk back into the rooms. When once we do, it's amazing. Everybody just wraps around you, and you get back in it, and it's awesome. But I wasn't going to do it. I was stubborn. I was no, I've done that before. It didn't work, so we're not going to do that. Obviously, it was me who didn't work it, but that was neither here nor there. So I stayed dry for a while. That whole time, I did not pick up the drink again. So I was dry for a while, but that wasn't going to last because I am an alcoholic. And so we went. My husband's Jewish, and we went to our niece's bat mitzvah, and it was an open bar, and I was like, okay, I gotta drink. There's just no way I can't drink. So I got wasted, and I talked to my husband after that, and he was like, okay, here's the deal. When we have any kind of celebrations or anything like that, you can drink, but you cannot bring it into the house. So that was the deal. So we had bat mitzvahs, we had weddings, we had, these different celebrations, which didn't come that often. There was a few times a year, and every time I would get completely wasted. And then somehow I didn't drink in the in-between times. I can't tell you how I did that. I just know that I did. I was dry. I was not the happiest of people. I lost my relationship with God. I was just going through the motions, raising my kids, and just going through like a robot, I guess you could say. Then we came up on the summer of 2016, and I don't know what was going on, but I was physically ill. I was having a lot of problems, and I was very physically ill. They were trying to figure out what was going on with me. I was in the ER overnight one night. They were running tests. They couldn't figure it out. And at the same time, I was going through all this. I'm getting mentally worse and worse and worse. And I will say I'm bipolar, so, that doesn't help. I'm medicated. I was medicated then too, but, that I don't know if that played into why I was mentally starting to lose it, but I was mentally starting to lose it. And my doctor decided to do a sleep apnea test. And it turns out that I was in desperate need of a CPAP machine. Um, so I got this CPAP machine that I instantly hated. I felt like I was being suffocated with this mask and this air being forced inside of me. And so I tried to make friends with it, and I named it Wilson after Wilson from Castaway. So Wilson was supposed to be my buddy, but I would just lay there tortured for hours trying to, and then I would finally rip the thing off. And of course, they tell you you have to wear it for at least 4 hours every night, or your insurance isn't going to pay for it. So, I'm sitting there trying to make these 4 hours, and they're basically 4 hours without sleep and being tortured. So mentally, I'm losing it worse and worse and worse. And then, and so then I decided that's it. This whole drinking on special occasions isn't working anymore because I've mentally lost it. I'm done for. And I hit the liquor store and I just told my husband, Adam, I said, sorry, but I'm drinking. I can't do this anymore. I'm drinking. So I picked right up on the daily drinking again. And I don't know why, but that did not help my mental state. It just it's supposed to, but it didn't work. So Wilson met an early demise. I literally took a knife and stabbed Wilson over and over and over again. And my poor children watched this. And then I cut down the tube. Pulled it all the way out, cut it all the way down. Every way I could dissect it, I did. And I didn't care what the insurance thought about that. So, Wilson was gone. But that also didn't help my mental state anymore. It was gone. So, yeah, it was very unstable. By November of that year, my psychiatrist, my therapist, and my husband all wanted me to go into Ridgeview. And I was fighting that because I just really didn't want to go. I couldn't imagine. I did that as a kid. I couldn't imagine doing that as an adult. I just didn't. I had a job. What am I going to tell my job? I just didn't want to go there. So I had this friend, David, that I talked to a lot, and he'd been trying to get me to back off the drinking in different ways, little subtle ways, and that wasn't really working. But then when this whole Ridgeview thing came up, he said, well, how about this? He said, what if you try to stop drinking, and maybe that will help you stay out of Ridgeview? And that was the first time I thought he had a good idea. So I stopped drinking, and when I went into Ridgeview, I was 8 days sober. So I did not stay out of there, but managed to stay sober for 8 days before going in. And the experience there was an absolute nightmare. It was a joke. It was nothing like when I was a kid. The doctor had lost his mind. The whole reason my doctor wanted me to go in there was so that they could mess around with my meds a lot more and have me, monitored while doing that. And this doctor just was messing with my head. This was November 2016, and he literally told me, he was telling me he wouldn't let me go. He was like, I'm going to keep you under surveillance. I'm going to push you and push you and push you until you break. And he said, unless you tell me that you'll go out and assassinate Donald Trump, then I'll let you out. So this is what the doctor told me in Ridgeview.
Wow.
So it was horrendous. So got out of there after 4 days. Absolutely no help, but I was sober, and I was like, I've got to do something. I've got to try this. So I went back. Well, actually, I Facebooked an old friend that had been on my Facebook the whole time from the rooms and was like, is there still meetings in the Douglasville group? And like I couldn't just drive over there and see. I was a little too nervous for that, so I wasn't gonna do that. So anyway, so they did supposedly, but that was, I guess, the people come and fluctuates off and on. But the first night I went, it was like nobody showed up, and I was out of there as soon as the meeting was supposed to start. And the second night, same thing, or I think there was like 1 or 2 cars there, so I was like, I'm not going to go in with just 1 or 2 people there. no way. And then the third night was a Friday night, so you know that meeting was packed. So I went in and got my white chip that night. Um, and that was November of 2016, and I told you that my sobriety date was January 29, 2017. So I had a couple one-day relapses in between those two times, and they were one-day relapses as I was trying to get it together. But I did manage to get January 29th, in there. So again, I was angry with God. I had a thing about being angry with God. And the thing about being angry with God is it's okay, because when you're angry with God, you're still in relationship with God. It's when you stop talking to Him and just ignore Him, and I've had those points in my life, that you're not in relationship with Him. But even when I'm yelling and cussing at Him and everything else, I'm in relationship with Him, and that's something, that is something. So I was there. I was angry, and I wasn't willing to not be angry. And I got a sponsor, and I told my sponsor that. I said, no, I said, I am pissed at God, and I am not willing to not be pissed at God. This was my comfort. Anger comforts us sometimes, and that was my comfort. So he said, well, what if you pray for the willingness to be willing to have a relationship with God, or, to forgive God and to go on. And I was like, okay, fine. I wanted to be sober, so I will pray for the willingness to be willing. And I did that, and I did that for a couple weeks. And then I dropped one of the willingnesses, and it was like, let me just be willing to. And, after a month and a half, I guess, of doing that, I found that the anger had really subsided a lot. And I was able to open up with God, in that relationship with God, and start from there. So, I'm catching up where I'm at in my notes. Hang on just a moment. So I was so miserable, and again, a lot of this was mental, but the only thing I knew to do at this point was to attack the steps. To feel better, because I wanted to feel better. And all I could do was work the steps, and I worked on as hard and fast as I could. And the other thing I did was I hung out if I wasn't in a meeting, I was with people outside of the meeting. There was my friend David, who had said that about Ridgeview. He had this friend who's from Nashville, Travis Meadows, who writes a lot of songs, and he does his own music, but he's also sold to Kenny Chesney, Dierks Bentley, people like that. And he's got really good, music that just changed my life kind of music. It's all about, he's got this CD, and not that I'm trying to advertise him, but it's called Killing Uncle Buzzy, and it's all about his life getting sober. So I was listening to this music like constantly, trying to get myself sober, and it was life changing. And another friend of mine in these rooms, Susan, was we came in around the same time, and she came to one of his concerts with me one time, and she just totally fell in love with him too. So that kind of became our thing. So we would go to his shows, and that was part of my sobriety, and part of her sobriety was to go to his shows whenever he was around, somewhere that we could travel to, and go just enjoy this music that we got sober on. So that was a big part of my sobriety in the beginning. And then I had a couple friends that I hung out with all the time. I had kids and a husband at home, and thank God my husband, because he was in the program, he knows the program and he understands the program, and he wanted more than anything for me to be sober. And he knew that meant that first year that I was going to be hanging out with my friends till 2, 3 in the morning, just about every day, and then coming home and getting up and going to work, and then going to a meeting that night, and then hanging out with them again till 2 or 3 in the morning. And that's what my friends Kenny, Leah, and I did, and we had other friends that we all hung out with too. And that whole first year, that's just what I did. And I've heard other people talk about it because they don't know. For me, I did a lot of my drinking at home. So that was really hard. And also, my husband is stubborn, and he has alcohol in the house, and that was very hard for me the first year. And it's, I'm at peace with it today, but that first year that was very difficult for me. So staying away from that and outside of the home as much as I could, because that's where I drank so much in the end, is what I needed to do. So that's what I did, and I recommend that to people, just to get with others like you. I mean, it just so happens that we all came in at the same time, or at least within 4 or 5 months of each other, and just really connected and bonded, and that was awesome. I continued working on the steps. I got a second sponsor and continued. The first sponsor I did 1 through 3 with. That one was kind of a temporary sponsor, and then I got another sponsor and started working on those and was working on that. And then my son's anniversary of his passing is August 24th, and about a year and a half. So I guess I was about a year and a half sober on August 23rd. Kenny called me at work, and Leah had hung herself, and so that was just really difficult to go through and to deal with, and many of y'all know her and have the same struggles. But I loved her to death, and I felt like I knew her and understand her, and I wasn't even entirely surprised that it had happened. But you always wish it could have gone differently, but we don't all make it. And as far as I know, she got sober, but she was just one that didn't make it. So that was really difficult to go through, and then it was right there on top of my son's anniversary. So I can say that I stayed sober through all that, and I'm grateful for that. Times before, so I hear people tell their stories, and tragic things happen, and they stayed sober through them, and I always say, well, that's not my story, because my son died, and then I relapsed, and that is my story. But that was the way it was meant to be, and that was the way it was meant to go. But through this tragedy, I'm grateful that I stayed sober, and it was meant to be that way. And I don't know, it's not what I can say about that, so that was just a hard one. But the next night, I got my third and final sponsor, and I'm grateful for her. She's awesome. So we've been working well. So August 24th will be 3 years that we've been together. So so that's been really, really good. We've we get into books, and we do books. We meet weekly, and we've been doing that for 3 years. So she's very dedicated to me. I appreciate that. But we'll do book work, we'll do reading, and sometimes we just catch up, and other times, it's when I might be having a crisis or whatever. Here recently, I've talked about this a little bit in the meetings, but just to say, even at 4.5 years, I mean, it's still real, and it still can sneak up on you. So I work for an Irish company. It's the same company I've been working for now for almost 18 years, that I had plenty of drinking through. And they do drinking. They're an Irish company. So we had this meeting a couple weeks ago with a vendor, and I knew the plan was to go bar hopping, which it was too hot. We didn't end up bar hopping. We just stayed at the bar at the restaurant and then go eat afterwards. So so we go, and we're sitting at the bar, and everybody from my company knows I'm sober. So if I wanted to drink, it would have been a little difficult. But the people we were meeting with, of course, didn't know. So everybody else orders drinks, and I order a Diet Coke, which is a splurge for me, so I just took advantage of that. And but we're at the bar, and everyone orders their drinks, and then when we go upstairs, and I'm thinking, God, those really do look good. And it's not even because I'm anxious, because around people I'm anxious, but that's not why they looked good. They just looked good. So we go upstairs, and nobody can remember, they all have these special names to their drinks, and nobody could remember what they had. And I started going through, and they wanted more. I started going through and telling each one of them what they had. So I had been sitting there the whole time, memorizing or whatever, just notating what they were drinking. And so the lady from the other company was like, wow, Amber's just sitting there drinking a Diet Coke. Well, she knows what each one of us are drinking. And I'm like, well, it's just a talent, as my boss is really eyeballing me. Sorry, we're good at that. But I did leave there with a mini obsession, I would call it. It was drink on the brain. I was really fighting myself going, I knew to play the tape through, I knew that this way, even if I drank just one time and got drunk one time and came right back into the rooms, what that would have done to me mentally would have really messed me up, and I know that. And then I went to high school with my twins, little Jack Daniels and Margarita, are now going into the 9th grade. And little Jack Daniels was off in Alaska with his daddy, and he, so I had to go to all of his classes and pretty much be him while he was on vacation. And I was remembering as I was going through, when doing orientation with my older son, who just barely graduated last year from high school, but I remember going through orientation with him, and I was maybe 6 months sober, maybe something like that, well, maybe 9 months even, but I was still just a mental wreck, and I can remember going through there and just not being present for him the way I would have wanted to be, and there's a lot of things I messed up through his whole 4 years of high school, because I was busy fighting to be sober, but I wish I could have done a better job at being mom too. And he had his own mess ups. I'm not responsible for everything by no means, but that was in my head as I was going through with my daughter and pretending to be my son, and I was like, if I had drank the other night, I would have been mentally just messed up again. I would not be present here in this moment with my daughter, getting my son's stuff, and I have a chance to be here for them for the next 4 years, in a way that I was not able to be there for my other son. But I'm much more, stable and together now, and if I don't mess that up, I can be there for them. So it was just a big eye opener for me. But it was just amazing how close we can come. So then it was just literally a couple days later that one of the bosses at work decided that he was going to buy pizza and a variety of alcohol for everybody for lunch. And there was not one moment of entertaining that thought. I just had absolutely zero desire. It just was like, I didn't even, I'm watching what I eat too, so I didn't even go for the pizza. I just, said no thank you to all of it. And I didn't hesitate. So, that's something that I'm really grateful for, and that I was able to go through that experience at the high school and come through and really, play these tapes through. So that's pretty much my story. I've just got a couple notes here on, some of the things that I've been doing because I deal with a lot of anxiety and depression. And amazingly, like I said, those of you who know me, this is going to sound really odd, but I haven't been nervous tonight. So, and I'm not drunk, I'm sober. So it's pretty cool. But normally I'm dealing with anxiety and depression, and I've got friends that I talk to about that and how to work on it, things like that, because medicine can only get you so far. But so I do my daily readings and stuff like that. And then I can't believe I hadn't even mentioned the sanctuary yet. I must have skipped over that in my notes. But I go to a church now that I'm very grateful that they allow me to use the sanctuary pretty much whenever I want, when nobody else is. That I go in there and I do a lot of prayer and meditation, and it's very quiet. It's not something I can find in my own home, but it's something I get there, and I've been doing it since I got sober this time. I've been going there since the very beginning, and when I say I go there, I mean I go there every day at lunch from work. It's a quick drive from work. It's not from here, but it's a quick drive from work. And I go there, and and like now, I always start off with a third step prayer with God, and that just opens me up. And then I may talk to God, or I may just sit there and listen. But it's just, it's a beautiful experience. I'm very grateful to have that, and that's helped my spirituality and my relationship with God immensely. For the longest time, it was an ongoing joke with Michelle and I that God was only in the sanctuary of the church. I couldn't talk to him out here; he wasn't out here. So it's been a task for me to learn to bring him out here as well, and of course he is out here, but for me to communicate with him out here. But I am happy to say I'm better about that today. One of the things that I like to say around here is to lower your expectations and raise your acceptance, and that's something that I've learned to do a lot, and it brings me peace. I work with my cousin, and she always says, "Oh, you can't do that. You're just giving in, and that's not what." And I'm like, "No, it's not like that. It's, you lower your expectations of other people you can't control anyway, and you raise your acceptance of what's going on outside of you that you can't control, because you can only control what's going on here, and not always that either." But anyways, that's one of the things that I like to say. But I've been having to. Recently, food was another one of my big addictions, and I had a surgery last fall, so now I can't turn to food either. So I've been looking for other things that I can be addicted to. My plan, I think Hannah's heard this one, my plan was to become addicted to exercise, because that just sounded like a good thing to do. But it turns out that probably for most alcoholics, if it's something healthy, we don't want to be addicted to it. It just doesn't work. So that hasn't happened yet. So Debbie hears about this, but I didn't go to the gym the past week. I'm in a lot of trouble. But anyway, don't tell Debbie. So other than that, the thing that I have picked up here recently, well, not recently now, it's probably been about 6 months, but that I love, and this is just something that, it brings me a lot of peace, and that's the reason I'm going to bring it up, is that playing guitar. I've been learning how to play guitar, and it has kind of become my new little addiction, and it's not unhealthy, so that's good, and it can be healthy because it's a stress reliever. So it helps me a lot with the anxiety and the depression, doing that, and I get to do it with my son, little Jack Daniels, because he likes the guitar too, and he's my little buddy, so we have fun doing that. So, you led me into this thing with like 15 minutes to go, so I think I'm done. Thank you.